17 Russians intended to defeat a Mongol army of 170,000. This masterpiece, adapted from real history, is known as the Russian version of 300 Spartans warrior. Evpaty Kolovrat, since childhood, has aspired to be a brave warrior. He obsessively practices dual sword skills. Once, Kolovrate went out with the Ryazan principality guards. They were attacked by a small Mongol force. Leaving him with severe psychological trauma. Whenever he falls asleep, he experiences brief episodes of amnesia. However, this encounter also allowed him to learn the Mongols' battle tactics. Now, 13 years have passed, and Kolovrate not only married and had children, but became the captain of the guard of the Ryazan principality. He trains his soldiers in the Mongol fighting techniques he learned in his childhood. Many years have passed since the Mongols' initial invasion. As the eastern part of Ryazan was most vulnerable to attacks by nomads, has gradually forgotten the terror of the Mongols. However, during a baptism ceremony for a newborn, a sentry suddenly arrives with news that a Mongol army of 100,000 is just 5 kilometers away from Legenda. This news triggers panic throughout the city, and everyone's first instinct is to flee. Even the king is restless. At this moment, the prime minister suggests that the king offer tribute to Khan Bate. If they can present valuable offerings, perhaps the Mongols will spare them. The king finds this feasible, although this method would impoverish the country for 2 years. As long as the nation survives, there will still be hope. Immediately, the king orders Kolovrate and the prince to bring countless treasures of gold and silver to the Mongol camp. There, they meet Khan Bate, the grandson of Genghis Khan. However, Khan Bate has no interest in the tribute. What he desires is for Kolovrate's king to kneel before him in submission. Kolovrate realizes that Khan Bate has no intention of negotiating.
Я думаю, что все вашим станет, если нас не будет.
Khan Bate admired his courage and immediately gave him a gold medal avoid death. With this, Kolovrate can freely travel in Mongol territory. As long as he needs it, the royal family will also provide him with food, clothing, and horses. This is not Khan Bate's kindness. He wants Kolovrate to watch everyone around him die one by one. With the Mongols' power at the time, world domination is not an impossible feat. Tensions escalate between the two sides. Various captives, who serve as human table legs beneath the table, can no longer endure the Mongols' brutal methods. Taking advantage of the chaos, they overturn the table and escape. The tent becomes chaotic. Khan Bate immediately orders an attack on Kolovrate's group. Kolovrate's group engages in a skirmish with Mongol soldiers. During their escape, the prince sacrifices himself to protect Kolovrate's group from pursuing Mongol soldiers and is unfortunately killed. Kolovrate's group runs into a forest and encounters a snowstorm. They are all frozen into blocks of ice. To their despair, a large black bear appears in front of them. Kolovrate's group dare not even breathe. Just as everyone was on high alert, a monk appeared behind the black bear. Under his calming influence, the black bear did not harm them. The monk led Kolovrate and the others into a cave and provided them with food. After eating and drinking their fill, everyone began to rest on the ground. But Kolovrate dared not sleep, fearing he would wake up the next day and forget everything. The next day, Kolovrate and his group returned to their country with their horses. However, they found that it had turned into ruins. The snowy ground was littered with the bodies of their compatriots. Last night, Khan Bate sent troops to attack Kolovrate's country. Mongol soldiers climbed the city walls and killed anyone they saw. The Mongols continuously used their catapults to launch flaming boulders into the city. The homes that the people relied on for survival were destroyed, and the soldiers died unwillingly. Women were subjected to brutal acts of humiliation in the streets. The princess raised her bow and arrow to fight back but was killed with a single blow. The once lofty king was publicly dismembered, and Kolovrate's wife, with a resolute look, was ultimately crushed under the ruins. In a blaze of fire, their former homeland was burnt to ashes. The air was filled with a nauseating stench of blood. Even in this scorched earth, Glove seemed to witness the fierce brutality of war. He arrived at his own doorstep and found his wife's flute amidst the ruins. He knelt on the ground, recalling the harmonious scenes of his wife and children. Tears silently streamed down his face. Soon, Kolovrate suppressed his inner grief and, with his men, raised the ancient bell symbolizing rebirth. Kolovrate struck the drum forcefully, and the sound reverberated in the devastated city. Emerging from the forest, surviving people began to emerge from hiding. In trees, cellars, and behind doors, everyone gathered following the sound of the bell. After a great battle, confusion and filled their faces. The sound of the bell also attracted Mongol soldiers stationed nearby, and everyone scattered and fled. However, Kolovrat slowly sat down on the ground. With Mongol soldiers approaching, they put a rope around Kolovrat's neck. Suddenly, Kolovrat stood up, striking the nearest Mongol soldier. The soldier fell to the ground, and Kolovrat grabbed the rope, pulling another soldier down the stairs. Wielding his dual swords, Kolovrat eliminated the entire enemy squad in just 1 minute. At that moment, the people who had been hiding nearby rushed out and ruthlessly finished off the fallen enemies. The Kolovrat group, who lost their homes and loved ones, is determined to stop the Mongol invasion. Kolovrat dispatched 3 individuals to nearby countries to seek reinforcements. He informed them that there would be a fork in the road along the route he provided. They must remember to go right, as going left would encounter Mongolian soldiers. However, during the journey, one messenger collapsed on horseback due to exhaustion. Surprisingly, the horse took him directly to the left path. After making all the arrangements, the Kolovrat group started trailing the Mongol army. They poured poison into the Mongols' water source. Just 2 barrels caused the Mongol soldiers to suffer from uncontrollable diarrhea, collapsing one by one, and even the horses were not spared. Watching the Mongol soldiers writhing in pain, they laughed uncontrollably. However, Kolovrat felt it was not enough. He took out his bow and arrow and tore the half of the pardon token given by Khan Bedi, attaching it to the arrowhead and shooting it onto the carriage next to the Mongol general. This startled the officer who was disciplining the soldiers responsible for collecting food and water. Immediately, he ordered the soldiers to pursue in the direction of the arrow. However, the Kolovrat would not let them succeed so easily. Kolovrat stood quietly in the snow, with the Mongol soldiers catching up behind him. They approached with swords in hand, step by step, intending to cut Kolovrat's throat. Suddenly, numerous arrows pierced through the air, shooting them all down. The Kolovrat group then began to collect their weapons and boots. While everyone was cheering and celebrating their spoils of war, Kolovrat suddenly collapsed on the ground. He hadn't slept for 3 days to ensure he wouldn't forget what had happened. His body had reached its limit. In the Mongol camp, Khan Bedi looked at the half of the pardon token in his hand, lost in thought. And on the other side, the Kolovrat, they was not idle. They exploited the Mongolian soldiers' superstitious weakness and disguised themselves as ghosts to infiltrate the Mongol military camp. Some soldiers really thought they saw the ghost of an innocent person and screamed in fright. The Mongol soldiers became disoriented, and the Kolovrat group, with their agile movements and unique disguises, harvested the heads of Mongol soldiers one after another. After dealing with the stationed Mongol soldiers, the Kolovrat group activated the Mongols' catapults. Enormous fireballs streaked across the night sky and landed inside the Mongol camp. The soldiers were scared and scattered in all directions. Soon, the Mongolian army's supply lines were surrounded by a sea of fire. At that moment, the Mongol general found the other half of the pardon token on a soldier. Seeing the camp burning red, Khan Bedi trembled with anger. However, a small victory was not enough to make up for the huge disadvantage. The 2 messengers sent by Kolovrat successfully reached a neighboring country, but when the other party heard that there were only about 20 people in Kolovrat, they refused to provide assistance to them, and even thought that they were looking for death. This meant they had to continue fighting alone. The messenger who took the wrong path was quickly discovered by Mongol soldiers. The Mongol soldiers directly tied him up and left him in the woods. Early the next morning, Kolovrat went out alone to scout the path. He found the man with an empty body. By this time, the Mongol army had already ambushed the area and launched an attack on Kolovrat. Although Kolovrat resisted with all his might, he soon found himself at a disadvantage. In a critical moment, a blizzard struck, making the Mongolian soldiers unable to open their eyes. At the same time, a large black bear jumped out from behind Kolovrat. The black bear was tall and astonishing. Short few meetings, Mongolian soldiers were killed without leaving a piece. The religious also rushed up with a group of refugees, which saved Kolovrat from danger. The continuous unrest made the Mongolians panic. Even the Mongolian general began to retreat. Angry Khan Bedi decided to personally command the troops to exterminate Kolovrate. He also wanted to reveal the true face of this ghost in front of all the soldiers. Afterwards, Khan Bedi ordered the entire army to turn around and chase after Kolovrat and his group. This decision was exactly what Kolovrat and his group wanted. Their goal was to hold back the Mongolian army and prevent them from continuing to invade. But now Kolovrat was in trouble because they encountered a group of children hiding in the forest. In order to safely evacuate the children, Kolovrat and his group had to engage in a direct battle with the Mongolians. Then Kolovrat decided to split the group. 2 people were assigned to escort the children. There were sails on the sleds, which could travel on water. As long as they reached the river, raising the sail would make them faster than horses. The other group was responsible for stopping the Mongolian army. After the children left, Kolovrat and his group began to set up traps. They cut down trees in the forest and made sharp sticks as traps. The larger ones were used to block the rolling logs on the slope. They also brought several buckets of water and poured them on the slope to freeze into ice. Kolovrat and his group waited for a long time, and the Mongolians finally arrived. The densely packed Mongolian soldiers seemed endless, while Kolovrat and his group had only 17 people. As the war drums sounded, the Mongolian soldiers tried to climb the slope, but because the ground was sprayed with water and froze, they couldn't climb up at all. Then they put on hooks. Just as they were about to reach the top of the slope, Kolovrat and his group pulled out hidden rolling logs and pushed them down. Khan Bati, who had run out of patience, directly ordered to shoot arrows. With a command, a dense rain of arrows fell on the entire slope. Kolovrat and his group quickly hid under the wooden boards, but after a few rounds, the Mongolians stopped. It turned out that the Mongolian general, in order to save face, directly consulted Khan Bati and wanted to personally fight Kolovrat to the death. They used the human wave tactic to climb to the top of the hill, but they didn't expect there to be traps. The formidable fighting power of Kolovrat and his companions made it a draw against the Mongolian army. Facing the continuously attacking Mongolian army, Kolovrat and his companions, who were gradually running out of energy, began to fall behind. Watching their brothers who were risking their lives, falling one after another, Kolovrat was completely enraged. He held two swords in his hands. The general wanted to fight him one-on-one but had his head cut off with one move. Seeing the general die in front of him, the Mongolian soldiers also began to counterattack. Kolovrat and his companions charged into the Mongolian army with 1 against 10. In order to buy time for the children and for their deceased family members, they fought bravely, sacrificing their lives and fearlessly killing the enemy. In a daze, one could seemingly hear the sound of swords piercing flesh. After a moment, the Mongolians were once again driven back, and Kolovrat and his companions suffered heavy casualties. Kolovrat planted the national flag on the hillside. His fearless spirit intimidated Khan Bati. He sent his subordinates to ask them what they wanted, and Kolovrat's response was also straightforward.
Ничего. Вы сами к нам пришли!
Angrily, Khan Bati ordered the use of catapults to eliminate them. As the firestones fell one by one, the warriors fell one after another. At this moment, Kolovrat looked at the distant sails and laughed happily. The children were saved, but suddenly countless stones pelted down on Kolovrat, and he fell. When he woke up again, he saw the bodies of his comrades lying all around him, and he did not forget what had happened before. Maybe his so-called amnesia is just an inner demon left to him by the Mongols when he was young. Now he remembered everything, and he would never forget again. Kolovrat took off his armor and picked up his swords one last time. Looking at him in front of him, the Mongolian soldiers stepped back step by step. Finally, Kolovrat couldn't hold on any longer and fell to the ground. Khan Bati came to his side and was shocked to see this man who fought until his death. He successively ordered his subordinates to give him a burial ceremony of the highest honor. From then on, every soldier who fought against the Mongols stood on the hill and fought side by side, because Kolovrat was always with them, always fighting for the homeland.